Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to be doing a demo today on taking that joke of the day call that we made in the last demo video, and we're going to do something a little bit interesting with it. At least I think it's interesting. So what we're going to be doing is generating a cloud function, and effectively your joke of the day project doesn't really need to change. That's kind of the nice thing. I mentioned last time that as long as you are receiving a JSON packet in the format your program's expecting, nothing needs to change. And that's what we're going to do here. So just for some context, it's kind of a side benefit of having Google Cloud use for this course. If you've ever heard of Lambda functions from AWS, this is exactly the same thing. We're going to be doing a serverless function here. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So here's my joke of the day. Okay, perfect. Um, yeah, this is already brightening my day. I was sick the past few days, so these awesome. Anyway, joke of the day API here. Nothing different in terms of our joke.js file, still using Axios. We still have our API link here. This is basically the only thing that we are going to change here. Okay. But what we're going to be doing is going into your Google Cloud Functions or into your Google console, and we're going to go to Cloud Functions. Now, you can just search for it here, so Cloud Functions. You could also pop open the little hamburger menu, and you've got to scroll Cloud Functions right there under Serverless. But I should set a little bit of context if you don't know what these are. They are wonderful little things. So this is a serverless function. And what that means is that you would write some function for your code, but you don't need to run a server. You don't need to do anything. All you do is define an arbitrary function. You call it with the URL, or you can call it in multiple other ways. We'll be calling it with the URL, and it will just run on the cloud and send you back whatever result you want. So typically you would do something kind of small or low footprint-ish for this type of thing. And we could go way, way, way deeper into this too if we wanted. But I want to kind of show you the hello world type of thing. So I clicked create function. Now there's a couple of gotchas that you need to be aware of when you first do this. So we're going to leave the environment as the same. We'll call this 658 demo. Region doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick US East 1 because it's closest to us. Trigger type, this is where we're going to leave it as HTTP, but if you want, there are other ways you could trigger this function. So if you've got an IoT application, you could do a pub sub type of thing. If you're doing anything with Firebase, you could trigger a cloud function that way. In the past, what I've done with Firebase is we've triggered a cloud function to scan an image to see if it contained explicit content. So you could do something like that. But the real big gotcha here is you want to click Allow Unauthenticated Invocations. So what this means is that anybody can call this cloud function. So you're going to have a public URL, and anybody could call this thing. So if you all of a sudden see 500 calls to your cloud function, you're probably you got lucky and some bot picked up your cloud function. For this, it's fine because we're not doing anything sensitive. But if you wanted to lock this down a bit more, you would click require authentication, but then you'd need to go down the route of setting up the entirety of the cloud IAM, which is the identity management setup. You'd need to set up like local keys, and it gets a little bit painful in a way. So we're just going to allow unauthenticated. HTTPS is fine. If you had any requirements for how much memory this thing's going to take up, you could put it here. So basically this thing will run for 60 seconds, and if it runs past that, it's going to die. Same with, we're going to assign 256 megs of memory for it. That's fine. We're not doing any heavy lifting here. If you had any environment variables you wanted, you could put that in, but we're just going to ignore that. Okay, so name must start with a letter. Demo 658. Okay, so then we're going to click save. Next. And then we're going to get some boilerplate code right here, and you can pick whatever runtime you want. So if you want to do it in Go or Java or Node or Python or Ruby, I'm going to pick Python 3.9, and that's because that's a language that I'm more familiar with. You can use whatever one you want, but just be aware there's going to be one bit where you're going to have to extrapolate a touch if you're not using Python because we have to set some access rights. And I'll provide a link for how to do that. Google has demos for every language they support in there as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we're not going to do anything too crazy in here just so that nobody gets confused, really. But what we've got is a hello world function. It's going to take in a request variable. And then what's going on here is this is our main.py, so this is a Python script. We have a requirements.txt if you needed any modules. We don't for this. And then our entry point is this hello world. So this needs to match this. So if you want to rename your function, make sure that you tell Cloud Functions this is the function to call when the request gets called. All right, so we got some comments here, and then we are basically getting the query string. So, or we're getting a request object, basically. So if we have anything in the query string, or if we're passing in arguments of some kind, we're going to handle this basically. So if there are arguments and there's a key called message, we're going to return that message. If we are sending a JSON packet, JSON object, and there is a message key in that JSON object, we'll return that. Otherwise, just return hello world. This might be a little confusing. Basically, if there's a query string, do this. If it's a JSON packet, do this. Otherwise, just return hello world. All right, so I'm going to click deploy, and this is going to take a couple of minutes to deploy, usually five or so minutes, I think, to update, maybe less depending. You'll be dropped back here to your main page. You're going to see this little spinny right here. And once that turns green, it's ready to go. If it's red or if you get a little triangle, then there is a problem and you need to fix it. And I would honestly I'd be very careful with your syntax just because going through the logs is mildly annoying. So while this is spinning up, I've got a test one here that I did to make sure this worked. And I just want to kind of show you that if you do have an error, you can go to the logs and you're going to get all of these lines. And then here we see, oh, here's 2 exclamation marks. This is an error, okay? So it's a little hard to parse out. That's kind of why we're not going to go too crazy in here. But if you're writing typical Python code, you should be fine. Let's see, so here's my traceback. So then here, basically, you're going to see a whole bunch of information. So look for something called like traceback or error log or something like that. No module name, oops, I clicked off of that. Traceback, no module named Flask underscore cores. So I had an issue with an old script. Basically, I did this wrong. So I would see, okay, this module doesn't exist. Let's go back and fix it. Okay, so we are live now. And once you see this little green check mark, it's active. So you can click your Cloud Function again, click trigger, and then you get a URL that will trigger this Cloud Function. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And I should see hello world. Okay. So again, I'm not passing anything in. We are getting the else case. Now, if I tacked on question mark message equals hello 658, that goes in there. If I called this message 2, wouldn't work because we're not handling message 2, right? So hopefully this makes sense. This is my query string. Now, the other bit about the JSON stuff, you can probably delete that as we're not really going to use it. This would be if I'm sending like a curl command with a JSON object for this function to handle. Or, you know, I'm trying to interoperate between multiple functions or something like that, and I'm packaging up JSON objects to send. So let's go ahead and now get this function set up in the format that our program wants. Now what we want to do is package up a JSON response from the basically to mimic the dad joke, so we don't have to um, change our React application, because that's the whole purpose of this. And just as a reminder, so if we did, I popped open a terminal here, curl https icanhasdadjoke.com. We just get an object back here. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to get rid of pretty much all of this. All right. And what we want to do is return a JSON object that has a joke field, right? Because we are in our React application, we're looking for a JSON object. So we're basically telling icanhasdadjoke accept a JSON object. And we want there to be a response.data.joke field. Okay, so we need to mimic this. All right, so in my hello world, I'm going to say response equals joke. This is my funny joke. Excellent. And let me zoom in a touch here. Basically, I'm just defining a Python dictionary here, where I'm saying this is my response object. The key is going to be joke. The value is going to be, this is my funny joke. And we can use something from my kids recently. What do elves do in the bathroom? Jingle smells. Doesn't ever get old. Okay, so dictionary, key, value. For what I need to do now is I need to import JSON. Okay, because we're going to basically package this thing up for our application. So return JSON.dump s response 200. Okay. So basically what we're doing here is here's my dictionary object. I'm transforming it into, I'm using the JSON library to package this up, and dump s is basically going to take this dictionary and effectively stringify it. And then we're going to return a response 200. So let's go ahead and deploy this. Now, nothing has really changed other than I deleted the old code and I put this new stuff in. If you were doing this in Ruby or Java or Go or whatever language you want, you would obviously have to translate my Python code to that language. But just a dictionary, return a JSON object. This should not work, by the way, just if you're wondering. I want to show you what's going to happen. BRB. Okay, so this deployed, we have no errors, which is always a good thing, while you're sitting waiting for that Spinny to resolve. Hopefully it works. Okay, so now if I refresh this page, so the link shouldn't change. If I refresh, I should now see, hey, look at that, a JavaScript, a JSON object. So here is my key, here's my value, it's got a joke field, life is good. What I can do here, and I don't need this message 2 anymore, let's go ahead and try this out in the terminal. And I closed it for some reason. So I can do curl, after it loads, curl, and then my link to my cloud function here. And then I get the response back. Now, it looks different than the icanhasdadjoke. So that shouldn't have been there, but basically when we do a raw curl call, it's just sending back a plain text. It's not sending a Java object, JSON object. So we have that. Now, all we need to do, in theory, is open up my inbox for some reason. Go back here. So this is our joke, RESTful thing. I'm going to go ahead, comment out the icanhasdadjoke, and replace it with my cloud function. All right, so in theory, this should work. Now, let's pop open console. Let's pop open our console. Okay. Refresh. Load. Big fat error message. Again, this was expected. So what we are not doing yet is sending a CORS header. So this is basically a cross-site scripting type of attack that it is thinking is happening. I'm not sure if this is because we're running a local server or if it's just something React, but basically we need to augment our headers a bit. So if you get this far, this is perfectly acceptable at this point, right? We do know that it works, but what we need to do is we need to set a CORS header. So basically, this is just something where we have to package up our header. And this is that page where I said they've got samples for every language. So I'm basically going to add in a bit of this for Python. But if you're using Ruby, you'd have to add this in here. If you're going PHP, here's everything you need for these headers, Node, Java, Go, all these fun ones. But basically, we just want to set the access control rights in the header. Okay, so I've got over here somewhere. Okay, edits. So basically what I did is I just copy and pasted with a few minor tweaks to fit my function here. So I've still got my response. However, we need to set the CORS information. So set CORS info, headers, nope. If request dot method options headers equals, I'm just going to copy and paste this. So basically, if we are sending an options request, which we shouldn't be, we need that. Okay, why is this so tiny now? I guess we'll make it a little smaller. Otherwise, we want to set the main CORS header. And we need to also add in headers. Okay, so this is basically right out of this link here. So if request equals options, return access control headers. Otherwise, we're just going to allow everything, basically. So this is new here. This is new here. And then this extra bit headers is new as well. So again, this is just getting around the CORS policy. And I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so that deployed. If we go ahead and refresh here, we shouldn't see anything different. So again, this is my just raw page. Now if we go ahead and go back to a React app and refresh, load, hey, look at that, it works just fine. Now, the only thing is that we're always going to return the same thing, right? So that's not necessarily what we want for a good dad joke simulator. So what we can do then, just to kind of tie this demo off, 20 minutes with cuts already, so that's good. Just want to show you an example here. All right, so I'm not sure if I'm waving this in or not, but one thing that's good to do if you are going to deploy something up to the cloud, it's usually good to make sure it works locally first, because if you have a little typo, it's really annoying to troubleshoot up in the cloud. There are ways that you can have a local cloud functions. I think it's a browser extension to test them out, but since I'm doing stuff in Python, I'll just do it here. I was just making sure that my randomness worked. So import random, I've got a list of jokes. I couldn't remember how to randomly select an element from array, and then I looked it up and it's random.choice. So the goal here is that I want to go ahead and select a random joke. Now, here is my joke. What I could say in here, so this is in my cloud function, jokes equals, let's bring this one in. Good dad joke offhand. Wow, drawing a blank. New joke, please. Perfect. All right, so I've got two jokes in my joke repository here. and I'm going to return random.choice jokes. And I need to also import random. Okay, so import random, create a list of possible jokes, fill my response object with a random choice, and then everything else is the same. Now, hopefully you're a bit more creative than I am in terms of joke responses. I have been sick the past few days, so my mind is completely gone in terms of creativity. You're back. Okay, so this finally updated. If I go ahead and refresh, and look at that. We've got some leftover, looks like formatting information in here, but that's fine for the purposes of this demo. We're getting a random joke back. And now if we go ahead and refresh our joke of the day, so there we go. Works just fine. Okay, so just to kind of summarize what we did. We did not change anything in our React application except for the URL. Okay, so that's why I said, you know, as long as the format's fine, this will work just perfectly well. And if you don't want to return a joke, okay, if you're returning a fact or if you're returning something else, just make sure that whatever you're calling this object in your JSON object, that you mimic that inside of your React application, right? Because again, we are returning this specific object. The key is joke. It could be anything you want it to be. Just make sure that it matches wherever you're defining that code. All right, we also defined a cloud function where the entire purpose of this cloud function is simply to be a publicly accessible bit of code that, you know, currently anybody can call, and they will get a formatted JSON object back. Okay, probably enough for today. We could spend a whole lot of time talking about cloud functions because I absolutely love them. But it's probably enough for today. So see you next time.